certain jobs that seem harmless on paper, the kind where you think to yourself, I'm just getting paid to sit in a chair and breathe. I used to work the night shift at a self-storage facility, located just on the outer edges of town, tucked right against a dense, sprawling line of thick pine woods. 12-hour shifts, completely by myself, watching a massive wall of security monitors that showed nothing but endless dead rows of pale metal doors glowing under sickly yellow lights. It paid surprisingly well for how little actual work was required. And for the first few months, absolutely nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Looking back now, that should have been my very first warning sign. Places like that, isolated, forgotten by the rest of the world and holding the discarded, forgotten memories of hundreds of strangers, are never actually that quiet. The facility itself was massive, housing about 400 individual storage units spread across 6 long parallel rows labeled A through F. At the very front sat a small fortified brick office where I spent my nights locked behind thick, bulletproof glass. My responsibilities were simple: monitor the security feeds, buzz in the occasional late-night tenant during business hours, and perform 2 mandatory physical walkthroughs a night with a heavy-duty flashlight, just to make sure no locks had been tampered with and no unauthorized vehicles were lingering on the property. By the time this particular night rolled around, I had already completed nearly 60 of those walkthroughs without a single incident. I had grown complacent. I thought I knew every shadow and creak of that place. It was a freezing Tuesday, the clock glowing a sharp 2:14 a.m. on my desk monitor, when something caught my eye on the camera feed for Row C. One of the units, Unit 214, showed up clearly on the screen, and it was wide open. Not broken open by force, not hanging loosely in the wind, but deliberately raised, open about 2 feet off the concrete ground. My stomach instantly knotted. I quickly pulled up the digital access log on my computer. Nobody had rented, accessed, or even requested a gate code for Unit 214 in over 6 months. It was supposed to be completely vacant. I cursed under my breath, grabbed my heavy metal flashlight, and stepped out of the warm office into the freezing night air. The cold hit my lungs like needles, so sharp I could instantly see my breath pluming white in the dark. The rows of storage units stretched out into the distance under overhead sodium lights that buzzed with a faint, maddening electric hum. Row C was located near the absolute back of the property, pinned right against the pitch-black wall of the pine forest where the perimeter fence ended. As I walked down the long, narrow aisle, the beam of my flashlight felt painfully small, swallowed up entirely by the heavy, oppressive dark pressing in from all sides. When I reached Unit 214, the monitor hadn't lied. The roll-up door was indeed raised 2 feet off the ground. I crouched down cautiously, my boots scraping against the gravel, and shined my bright beam into the pitch-black interior. Inside sat a random assortment of forgotten belongings, taped-up cardboard moving boxes, an old wooden dresser with its drawers missing, and a rusted stack of folding chairs. Normal, mundane storage unit junk. There was no sign of a forced entry, no footprints in the dust outside, and absolutely no logical reason why that door should have been raised in the middle of the night, with me as the only living soul on the entire property. Frowning and feeling an uneasy prickle of sweat crawl up the back of my neck, I pulled out my phone and called my facility supervisor, waking him up from a deep sleep. "Just lock it back up and write it down in the incident log," he muttered sleepily, clearly annoyed at being disturbed before hanging up. I swallowed hard, grabbed the heavy metal handle of the door, and shoved it upward before pulling it firmly down. It slammed into the concrete with a loud metallic clatter, and I flipped the heavy brass padlock through the latch, snapping it shut with a satisfying click. That was the exact moment the blood drained entirely from my face. From deep inside the pitch-black unit, pressed up against the other side of the metal door I had just locked, came a sound. Knock, knock. It wasn't the natural settling of metal contracting in the freezing cold. It wasn't a shifting box or a settling wall. It was a deliberate, calculated rhythm, like human knuckles rapping firmly against the inside of the corrugated steel door right at my eye level. My entire body locked up. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like they were bolted to the frozen gravel. I couldn't move, couldn't even draw a full breath. Then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time, more aggressive. Right where my face was staring blankly at the metal. I didn't think twice. I turned on my heel and bolted down the row, sprinting as fast as my legs could carry me back toward the safety of the front office, my heart hammering violently against my ribs like a trapped bird. I slammed the heavy steel door behind me, threw the deadbolt, and didn't dare glance at the security monitors for row C for the remainder of the night. I just sat there under the harsh fluorescent lights, shaking uncontrollably, staring at the wall until the first pale streaks of dawn finally broke across the horizon. The next morning, when my supervisor finally arrived for his morning shift, I confronted him immediately, demanding answers about Unit 214. He went completely quiet, the color draining from his face. He poured himself a cup of coffee with a trembling hand and finally told me something I desperately wish he had mentioned during my initial training. Unit 214, he whispered, staring down at his mug. Used to belong to a man who fell behind on his payments about 3 years ago. When management finally authorized us to legally clear it out for non-payment, we found all his old childhood belongings, his furniture, his clothes, everything still boxed up, completely untouched. But we never found him. He looked up at me, his eyes dead serious. He had been reported missing by his family months prior. The police searched the entire property, the woods behind us, everywhere. They never found a trace of him. The unit was eventually cleaned out and re-rented to other people over the years, but every single tenant broke their lease early within weeks. They were always pale and shaking, refusing to give a straight answer about why, except that they kept hearing someone trapped inside asking to be let out. I listened in absolute horror, the memory of those sharp knocks echoing endlessly in my mind. I worked exactly 2 more shifts after that day. Both of them spent huddled in the office with the lights blazing, refusing to step foot outside. On the 3rd day, I handed in my uniform, walked out, and never looked back. I told them I found a better paying job in the city. That was a complete lie. The truth was, I knew in my gut that I had locked that door from the outside, but whatever was living in the dark on the inside wanted me to know it was still waiting for someone to let it out. There is a very specific kind of dead silence that only exists on the highway at 3 in the morning. When you are driving alone through pitch-black miles of winding asphalt, with nothing keeping you awake except the faint glow of your dashboard and the low hum of the radio. Your mind starts playing tricks on you. But sometimes, the things standing out in the dark aren't tricks at all. I learned that hard truth during the 6 months I spent working as a late-night delivery driver for a local courier service in a heavily wooded rural county. Most of my runs were simple, dropping off medical packages to closed clinics or hauling forgotten legal documents to empty office buildings. It was quiet, lonely work, but the pay was decent, and I preferred the isolation over dealing with rude customers during the day. Until a stormy Tuesday night in late November. It was pouring rain, the kind of heavy, blinding downpour that turns the highway into a black mirror reflecting your own headlights. Around 2:45 a.m., my dispatch radio crackled to life with a priority delivery. A small sealed lockbox needed to be dropped off at an old, abandoned-looking commercial warehouse located down a remote gravel access road off Route 9. Dispatch claimed the client had paid an extra rush fee and was waiting inside the building to sign for it. I didn't think much of it at the time. People running shady businesses or odd-hour operations in the middle of nowhere were common enough in this line of work. I turned my car down the unpaved access road. Tree branches heavy with rain whipped violently against my windshield, scratching loudly against the paint as I drove deeper into the dense forest. After about a mile of bumping along the dirt trail, the warehouse finally loomed up ahead. It was a massive, weathered metal structure with no exterior lights on, except for a single, flickering bulb hanging directly above a heavy side service door. I pulled my car to a stop, grabbed my jacket, and stepped out into the freezing rain. The air smelled intensely of damp earth and rust. As I walked toward the side door, clutching the heavy lockbox, I noticed something strange. There were no other vehicles parked anywhere around the building. No cars, no trucks, no delivery vans. Just an empty lot surrounded by towering pitch-black woods. I reached the heavy metal door and knocked firmly twice. Thud. Thud. Inside, there was a sudden, sharp scraping sound, like heavy furniture being dragged across a concrete floor. A second later, the lock clicked loudly, and the door slowly creaked open about 6 inches, revealing a thick, impenetrable wall of darkness from within. Nobody stepped forward to greet me. No face appeared in the gap. "Delivery for the night client," I called out into the dark, holding up the lockbox. From deep inside the pitch-black warehouse, a flat, distorted voice answered back, sounding almost like it was being spoken through a broken intercom. "Just leave it on the floor right inside the threshold. Close the door behind you." I frowned. Something about the way the voice sounded felt completely off, stiff, robotic, and unnatural. But I figured the client was just weird or didn't want to get wet. I crouched down, pushed the heavy door open a little wider, and slid the metal lockbox across the dusty concrete floor just inside the entrance. As I straightened back up to leave, my eyes had adjusted just enough to the gloom to notice something horrifying. The floor immediately around the doorway wasn't covered in dust. It was completely soaked in dark, fresh footprints. But what made my blood instantly run cold was that the footprints weren't leading toward the door from inside the room. They were densely clustered in a tight circle, facing outward, as if a dozen people had been standing shoulder to shoulder in the pitch-black dark, staring straight out at me while I drove up. A sudden, choking wave of pure terror hit my chest. I didn't say a word. I grabbed the door handle, slammed it shut, and bolted backward through the rain toward my car, slipping once in the mud before managing to scramble inside. I locked all 4 doors with a frantic smash of the button, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. I threw the car into reverse, tires spinning wildly in the mud, and looked up through the rain-streaked windshield toward the flickering light above the service door. The door was wide open again. And standing right in the middle of the doorway, illuminated by the dying yellow bulb, was a tall, unnaturally thin figure wearing an oversized heavy courier jacket. It was standing completely motionless, its head tilted at a violent, broken 90-degree angle, staring directly at my car with hollow, pitch-black eyes. I didn't wait to see anything else. I slammed my foot down on the gas, tearing down the gravel road with my tires screaming, not stopping until I hit the safety of the main highway miles away. I quit that job the very next morning. When I tried to call dispatch to report the sketchy warehouse address, the number rang out dead and dispatch told me no such delivery order had ever been logged into the system that night. To this day, whenever I'm forced to drive down a dark, isolated road late at night, I keep my doors locked, my radio off, and I never, ever stop for a knock in the dark. There is a distinct, suffocating kind of terror that sets in when you are locked inside a massive, unfamiliar house late at night, entirely responsible for someone else's safety while things begin going horribly wrong. When you are a teenager trying to make extra money by picking up weekend babysitting gigs, you expect a quiet night of watching television, eating snacks, and occasionally checking on a sleeping child upstairs. You never expect to realize that you and the child are trapped inside with something that managed to slip past every locked door and security system. I learned that horrifying lesson during my junior year of high school, taking on a last-minute Friday night babysitting job for a wealthy family who lived on the secluded outskirts of town. The house was enormous, a modern 2-story architectural build surrounded by dense woods and a towering iron security gate at the end of a long, winding private driveway. The parents had left around 7 in the evening, explaining that they had an urgent charity gala to attend in the city and wouldn't be back until past midnight. They left behind a fully stocked fridge, strict instructions not to open the door for anyone under any circumstances, and their 7-year-old son, Leo, who was already fast asleep in his second-floor bedroom at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway. For the first few hours, everything was completely normal. I finished my homework, watched a movie in the downstairs living room, and checked on Leo twice. He was fast asleep, breathing softly in his bed. It was a little past 1:30 a.m., when the absolute silence of the house was suddenly shattered by a sharp, metallic clang echoing from the ground floor. My heart instantly slammed against my ribs. I froze on the couch, holding my breath, straining my ears to listen over the faint hum of the central heating. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just the old house settling in the cold night air, or perhaps an ice cube dropping from the kitchen freezer. But then it came again. A heavy, deliberate thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of bare footsteps padding softly across the hardwood floor in the dark kitchen just around the corner. Panic seized my chest. I knew for a fact that both front and back exterior deadbolts had been securely locked before the parents left. No one could have gotten inside unless they had a key, or unless one of the ground floor windows had been forced open. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table with trembling fingers, my hands shaking so violently I could barely unlock the screen. I quietly stepped off the couch, hugging the shadowed wall of the hallway, trying to sneak a peek into the kitchen without making a sound. The kitchen was pitch black except for the pale blue glow of the microwave clock. Standing right in the middle of the room, facing away from me toward the dark pantry, was a tall, unnaturally thin silhouette wearing a dark, oversized hoodie. But what made my blood freeze solid wasn't just the fact that an intruder was standing inside the house. It was the sound coming from him. He was rhythmically whispering the exact same phrase over and over again, his voice cracking and distorted like a broken radio frequency. I found the back door open. Except I knew the back door hadn't been open. I had personally checked and locked it twice, which meant this person had either been hiding inside the house hours before the parents even left, or they had broken in through a second-story window using the towering oak tree that brushed against the roof. Before I could even process what to do, the figure slowly stopped whispering and began turning its head around, not just glancing over its shoulder. Its entire head turned in a sickening, unnatural 90-degree arc until its face was pointed directly backward toward the dark hallway where I was standing, illuminated by the faint light of my phone screen. A choked gasp escaped my lips before I could stop it. The intruder's head snapped fully toward me, and in the fraction of a second before I bolted, I saw his face. His eyes were wide, completely bloodshot, and stretched into a terrifying, ear-to-ear grin that didn't look human at all. I didn't think twice. I turned on my heel and sprinted as fast as my legs could carry me toward the grand staircase, taking the steps 3 at a time. Behind me, I heard the heavy, frantic pounding of bare feet hitting the hardwood floor, sprinting full speed in pursuit. Thump, thump, thump. The footsteps were closing the distance terrifyingly fast. I reached the top of the stairs, threw myself down the second-floor hallway, and burst into Leo's bedroom just as I heard the intruder's heavy breathing right at the top of the stairs. I slammed Leo's bedroom door shut, threw the heavy brass interior security lock into place, and frantically scooped the terrified, crying 7-year-old out of his bed. Leo was sobbing, asking what was happening, but I clamped my hand gently over his mouth, whispering for him to stay dead silent. We locked ourselves inside the small master bathroom attached to the bedroom, crouching down behind the heavy oak vanity cabinet in total darkness. Outside in the bedroom, the heavy footsteps reached the door. Bang! 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 A massive, brutal blow struck the wooden bedroom door, shaking the entire frame. The intruder wasn't trying to pick the lock or turn the handle. He was violently slamming his entire body against it, trying to shatter the wood. "I know you're in here. Open the door, little babysitter." A hoarse, guttural voice hissed from right outside the bedroom, sounding like sandpaper scraping across concrete. I held Leo so tightly against my chest that I could feel his frantic heartbeat matching my own. I dialed 911 under the sync screen, my thumb slipping twice on the keypad before the call finally connected. I whispered our address and our exact location to the dispatcher, praying to God that police headquarters wasn't too far away. For what felt like hours, the relentless pounding continued. The intruder threw himself against the bedroom door 3, 4, 5 times until the wood began to splinter loudly down the center. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face, believing completely that this was where it ended for us. And then, right as the bedroom door gave way with a deafening crack of splintered wood, the piercing wail of police sirens suddenly echoed from the bottom of the long driveway, their flashing red and blue lights painting the bedroom walls in frantic, spinning streaks of color. Downstairs, the front door flew open with a crash, followed by heavy police boots and shouting voices echoing through the grand hall. "Police! Drop to the ground right now! Hands behind your head!" Within seconds, the violent pounding at the bedroom door stopped entirely, replaced by the chaotic sounds of a struggle down the hall and the heavy shouting of officers clearing the house. 10 minutes later, 2 police officers wrapped in heavy jackets escorted me and a crying Leo down the stairs and out into the crisp night air, placing us safely inside the back of a heated patrol car. When the paramedics and investigators finally finished clearing the home, the lead detective pulled me aside, his face grim and pale. He told me that they had found the intruder hiding in the master bedroom's walk-in closet, an unstable local man with a long history of breaking into isolated properties, living in the attic spaces and crawl spaces of luxury homes for days before making his presence known. When they searched his pockets, they found a collection of personal items stolen from the house, including a sharp hunting knife and a set of keys belonging to the family. The parents arrived home 20 minutes later, breaking down in absolute horror when they realized how close they had come to losing everything. I never babysat again after that night. Even years later, whenever I'm home alone and hear a sudden, unexplained creak from the hallway or a faint thud against the floorboards, my heart stops, and I can still hear that terrifying voice hissing from the dark. Before you go, if this chilling true story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with your friends and subscribe to MR.SHIVERCAST right now with notifications turned on. We have terrifying new horror stories coming your way every single week, and you definitely don't want to miss them. Stay safe out there in the dark. Good night.